Now, let's look at how Matthew works, and this is on the bottom of your notes, the Messiah's kingship into every chapter of the book. Matthew records God's presentation of his perfect king. In each chapter, Jesus is seen in his beauty and power as king. Now, there are four broad areas, and the first one is at the bottom, God's king revealed, and that's in the first 10 chapters. And let me show you what I mean, and you might need a pencil. The first one, in chapter 1, God presents his king, first of all, by his royal ancestry. Jesus is traced as a direct descendant of royalty, of King David. And that's the first chapter is all about Christ as a king, and he's presented by his royal ancestry. Secondly, he's in chapter 2, he's presented as a king by arriving in a royal way. He had messengers. He had angel choruses. He had wise men, actually magi, kingmakers, coming to greet him. And that's what chapter 2 is all about, the royal arrival. Thirdly, he is presented by his prepared ambassador. Usually, I remember before President Nixon went to China, do you remember first they sent low level, then they sent medium level, then they sent high level, then they sent ambassadors, and then finally, most of you aren't old enough to remember that in 72, but I remember it, I'm old enough. But they did this succession of dignitaries. Well, before Christ came, a prepared ambassador came. That's John the Baptist, who was a relative, a cousin, and he declared that Christ was coming. Chapter 4, and this is something you'll have to fill in. God presents his king defeating the rebel leader Satan. Defeating. Now that is important. A king has to establish that he's king. So he has to come in and establish his right to rule and that he is powerful. And so Christ comes, and at the front door of his ministry, after having this special baptism by the ambassador John the Baptist, chapter 4, he defeats Satan. Chapter 5, and this is interesting, God presents his king describing the character of his subjects. And chapter 5 talks about what we're supposed to look like. Now, I know that some people relegate the Sermon on the Mount to being for the millennium, but the Sermon on the Mount is actually a beautiful picture of what it takes to be a Christian. Blessed are those that mourn, that are blessed are the poor in spirit. That's someone that realizes they're utterly lost. Poor in spirit means a beggar. Blessed are those that mourn. You're sorry for your sin. Blessed are those that hunger and thirst after righteousness. You want to know the Lord, they'll be filled. It's just a beautiful picture of how God deals with us and how we approach him. Chapter 6, God presents his king describing the conduct of his subjects. Remember that they pray this way in secret, and they don't give their money showy, and they are characterized by giving their coat to someone that asks them. Their conduct. That's how his subjects of his kingdom conduct themselves. Chapter 7, the consistency of his subjects. They ask, seek, and knock. In chapter 7, we'll see in a few minutes, they come the right way. His kingdom dwellers consistently come to him the right way, because there's only one way to him. There aren't many ways to God. There's one way, and that's through Christ. We'll see that in just a minute. Chapter 8, God presents his king displaying his power. In chapter 8, you can read it successively. Christ shows his power over disease, over demons, and over mankind. He is totally king in the natural world and shows his power. Chapter 9, we see again Jesus displaying his power, this time over the spiritual world. He can forgive. He is the Lord of religion. He is the Lord of death. He is the Lord of darkness and dumbness. I mean, even if a demon possesses someone, he says, I have power. He says, I have all power. He shows his power not only in the physical realm. He can control the nature. He can speak to trees and to the ocean or to the Sea of Galilee, but also in the spiritual world. And then in chapter 10, Christ presents his king, and he's commissioning his apostles. That's where Jesus picks his official 12. And it's interesting he picks 12 because remember what 12 in the Old Testament was, the 12 tribes. So these are the new people of God, the 12 apostles for the church. And what's interesting, some people don't understand. They think that the church has displaced permanently Israel. But actually, when we get to the end of the Bible in Revelation, we find both of them back again. We find Israel and the church converging as the people of God. We find the 12 thrones, or the 12 tribes, of Israel, and also the 12 apostles making up the foundation and entrance gates of heaven. And you find the 24 coming together, the two groups of 12, the 12 Old Testament and the 12 New Testament leaders. And those are the 24 elders that surround the throne of Christ and lead all of the redeemed in worship of the King of Kings. So it's beautiful, but we find the 12 apostles in chapter 10.